For today's video, we are going to build and deploy a team of customer service AI agents in 15 or so minutes. Now, we're going to just jump right into this because fortunately, unlike a lot of my videos, this one does not require a lot of coding, if any at all, and it really gives us a cool visual way to actually go about making agents, defining their tasks, and then actually seeing them in action once we've built them. We're going to jump right into this by looking at what is going to be the backbone of what we end up using today, and that is AutoGen Studio. You may be familiar with AutoGen as a Microsoft repository that is open source, basically allowing kind of agentic frameworks. You can see here, it creates multi-agent AI applications that can act autonomously or work alongside humans. However, just in its default kind of version, there is a bit more coding required here to actually go ahead and get this all working. Fortunately, that is where AutoGen Studio really comes in clutch, because we can go ahead and really simply download this, and without having to do much, if anything at all, in the terminal, we can then hop into our browser and graphically interact with this to build out our agents. So the first thing we need to do is actually just create a Conda environment in which to download this using Python 3.10 or greater. We can now see that I have created the agents Conda environment, and once it has successfully been created, I'm going to simply activate it. And following the activation of the environment, we can go ahead and get AutoGen Agent Studio set up on our computer just by running this one command here to pip install it. Depending on your network speed and whether or not you've played with this before, as I have, it will take a little bit of time to perhaps download and install the required dependencies, but most of mine were cached, being that I have been playing with this for a little bit of time on this machine. And once that's done, our next step is basically just to go ahead and actually launch this application so we can actually use it from within our web browser. We can just copy paste this into the terminal, which will go ahead and actually start AutoGen Studio UI on localhost on port 8081, which basically just means it's running locally on our machine. So our browser will basically just be kind of pointed to our machine in order to actually run this. So if we control click on the URL that has appeared in terminal, we will actually get our first look at AutoGen Studio. I am now going to just full screen the browser, as we do need to have as much screen real estate here as we can to actually get a better look at this. Our first impressions can basically tell us that this is quite simple. In the side pane here, there really are only 4 options, and it is kind of nice to have something that perhaps can be simpler and a little less intimidating for those starting out. We'll just quickly kind of cycle through these just to briefly touch upon what they are, but once that's done, we're basically going to go ahead and use one of the templates here to actually create our customer service agents. The first thing here, which we will become more familiar with very soon, is the team builder, which is basically a graphical interface in which we can define our agents, give them tools and things of that sort. We can actually have visually drawn connections between them, which really helps us in kind of understanding how they exist together, or should I say coexist and function. Following that, we have the Playground tab, which essentially will allow us to actually test and play with a team that we make in a session, where basically we can send it messages, see how the agents respond, and see kind of what they do, if they do it correctly, and if we need tweaks or not. Following that, we have the gallery, which is just a default component gallery, as we see right here. These are things that our agents have available to them, such as tools. There's a calculator, an image generation tool, PDF generation tool, fetch web page, Bing search, and Google search. Now, as we see right here, this is in beta, so this is still a very early version of AutoGen Studio. So for now, the number of tools available to us are perhaps limited. However, you can really go in and make your own if you are so inclined. But for today's kind of customer service agents, we fortunately have what we need in the default setup here. You can see we have different models available to us. It is actually possible as a default option to run this locally using Mistral 7B. But for today's kind of quick demonstration, and in keeping with perhaps a less technical background kind of deployment, we are just going to go ahead and use GPT-4o through the OpenAI API, as it allows the agents to be smart, works simply, and really just makes things easier for this demo. We also have terminations, which essentially are ways the agents know when to actually stop performing their agentic actions. Following this, our last option here is the deployment icon, which essentially shows us how we can actually go ahead and take what we built here in the team builder and actually get it working for something outside of the AutoGen Studio app, which is how we are going to conclude today's video, which is actually going to be linking this to a personal website of mine so that anyone who sees the website can actually chat with these agents and get answers. So let's jump right into it and build these customer service agents. Now, to make this as simple as possible, I am essentially just going to use a kind of default template here. And in this case, I am going to be using the web agent team, which consists of 3 agents. In order to actually go ahead and use this, we can just click the button right here, which will allow us to use this as a template. And once we do this, we will see that our kind of field of view here populates with the web agent team. We now have our web agent team here as a default template, which really has basically auto set up a lot of the stuff that we would have otherwise needed to do, which is really nice. For the purpose of this exploration, I can now kind of go ahead and close the team sidebar as well, as we want to have as much screen real estate available for us here to actually be able to kind of see what's going on. So we can see here that in this library, we do have a list of 4 agents. We have an assistant agent, a multimodal web surfer, another assistant agent, and then a user proxy agent. Now, we don't need to be hyper concerned about what these actually do specifically because a lot of what goes on here is kind of done for us, but we can quickly take a look at this. I do want to note that we could also full screen this to get a better and more visually appealing way to look at these, and you can kind of move these things around as well. However, that won't really affect the actual functionality of what we're playing with right now. So first and foremost, we can see that we almost have our, I don't want to call it an orchestrator, which is a terminology from like Microsoft's Magentic 1 agentic framework, but for all intents and purposes, this is kind of an orchestrator where basically we can see that the component here has a prompt for this selector where basically it tells it you are a coordinator, you have the following agents available, which are supposed to perform the following tasks. You can read the conversation, select the next agent to actually perform an action, and then if you think it is all done, then you can actually kind of terminate it. So that is where the termination condition comes here, and we can see that the model for what is going to be used here is GPT-4o Mini, which of course we will actually need an API key to play with, but a lot of agentic things at this point are probably going to be running on the cloud, at least in terms of the model that is actually powering them. So I don't actually mind having to use the API for today's video. We can now see that this branches off into our 3 agents. The first is our multimodal web surfer, which is kind of as its name sounds, where basically it can browse the web and extract information from web pages to kind of provide answers, which in a customer service situation is very important because I'm basically going to be able to point this to a product page on one of my websites and have it answer questions about the product that prospective customers may have. Following that, we can scroll down and see that we have the assistant agent right here. And in order to actually edit any of these, we can just click this little purple edit icon in the top right. From here, we can see that this assistant and its system message is basically telling it you are a task verification assistant who is working with a web surfer agent. You need to check to see if it's been completed successfully. You need to kind of see if anything else is needed. You can prompt it to keep going or see if it has successfully done what it needed to. And you can also terminate, which will basically kind of end the agentic loop so that they don't infinitely just keep trying to perform tasks, which can obviously be, 1, a bad experience for the customer, but 2, it can rack up API charges, which we obviously want to avoid both of those. Finally, we have the user proxy agent, which for today, we're not really going to, I think, be as heavily invested in as when we actually deploy this onto the site. We are going to kind of nerf this thing's ability just for simplicity, but basically, this can represent a human user through an input function. So for my understanding of what this can actually do, if we need more information from the user, this can actually help us do that. So we could ask, could you please clarify what you mean in specific, or things of that sort. Now that we have our kind of agentic flow understood, we are really just going to make some minor tweaks to these to actually fit them to my specific example here, which is going to be a team of customer service agents who are familiar with one of my products, which is now defunct, but the Ominous Industries R1 social robot. So when we talk to these, they will be able to answer questions about the robot, and we'll see it live in action. The first thing I'm going to do is just exit full screen here, as I actually kind of like working with it better in this way. However, following that, I am actually going to edit some of the, I suppose you could say, prompts for each of these agents. So the selector prompt, instead of telling it that it is the coordinator of a roleplay game, I'm going to just change that to tell it that it is the coordinator of customer service agents. And basically, that is all I'm going to actually do with this thing. And I will quickly just note that while it may not be as pertinent to today's video and demonstration, you can actually go ahead and see the actual JSON that is being kind of used for these agents. But this is kind of outside the scope of what I want to show here, which is just kind of a more visual agent-based workflow. So we will switch back to the form editor. However, we are pretty much all set with this agent being defined. Following that, we are going to go into the web surfer agent, and this is really the only place in which we actually need to do much of any code at all. And even saying that is kind of pushing, like, this wouldn't even really be considered coding, I believe, for most use cases. So we're not going to really change any description or anything like that. However, for this, we are going to switch into the JSON editor right here. And if we kind of scroll down, we can see that this is a rather short little snippet of JSON, but it does have a start page. So being that I want this agent to pertain only to my site and my specific product, I am actually going to just replace the page in which it starts with the page for my specific product, which I will actually do now. This is my website with the now defunct robot. However, the product page does still exist, so me as a company who wants this for customer service utilization will basically just copy paste this URL and replace it with the Bing reference right here, so that our multimodal web surfer agent will actually start off on my product page and be able to answer questions about it. We are going to save the change, and following that, we are just going to go down here and edit the assistant agent. And just as we did kind of with the first one that we edited, we are going to just kind of change the system message slightly so that it kind of is more pivoted towards customer service agentic understanding. And I am just changing it really simply to say you are a customer service verification assistant. And you can really see I'm not doing much of anything in terms of heavy editing or things of that sort to any of these agents. So this is really cool and just an awesome way to actually be able to get some experience, actually build out agents, even deploy them without having to feel like you need a PhD in computer science to play with this stuff. So following that, we finally have the user proxy agent. However, I am not actually really going to do anything here, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually close this one. Now, our next step before we can actually go ahead and first and foremost just verify that these work when we go into the playground is to actually go ahead and get the model set up. Now, we will see that we have a warning right here, and essentially what this is going to tell us when we click on it is that our API key is not set. So we will see you need to pass the API key to the client or set it as an environment variable. And for what we're going to do here, we are basically just going to go ahead and actually set it from within the AutoGen Studio web UI. So we can drag and drop models if we wanted to. So you can see that that actually changes it if you do that. However, I am going to stick with 4.0 Mini as it is relatively cheap in terms of API costs, and especially for business use cases, as long as you make sure that you rate limit in a deployment environment, meaning you can't have a customer just keep spamming the bot. This will be a very, very palatable business expense, in my opinion. So we will now basically go ahead and just actually enter the API key, which you obviously want to keep secret and safe. So what I'm about to do here would be considered bad practice because I'm going to show mine on screen, but I will then just go delete it. So, you know, if you want to try to take it, you can, but it won't work. So we can see that the API key is right here. Fortunately, it is auto-filled, I believe, because I was playing with this earlier, so it saved some of the kind of settings, if you will. However, I just need to actually make sure that these other agents have access to that API key as well, which I can do, and we will see that this one unfortunately does not. So I have my text file set to open in VS Code, so if that looks confusing, that's why. But we're going to paste that in, save changes, and then do the same for the assistant agent, and save changes. Following that, we will see that our error has gone away and the team is successfully validated, which basically means that we can actually go ahead and move on to testing this team. So I am going to expand this sidebar right here and this one as well, just so we can follow along if we have all of these expanded at home. So from the playground, I am going to make a new session, and this is going to be using my newly created web agent team. Except instead of asking it what the height of the Eiffel Tower is, I'm going to ask it how much is the R1 robot, which of course is the product page that we have given the agents. And once we press send, we will see a bunch of different things. However, the agent team will show us that it is processing, and we will actually kind of see a visual pipeline of the agents actually functioning, which really is quite cool. So we can see for some reason that I am now being prompted back. However, it did correctly give us the price, but we can see that this is kind of the user agent thing in there. I forget what it was specifically called, but where it will sometimes kind of ask the user input. So let's see. Did not specify if they needed additional information. Please confirm if the user needs more details or just the price. I just needed the price, thanks. And we will see that this basically keeps going, and we can actually go in and kind of see the workflow here, which really is like, sorry, I wanted to swear, but this is extremely cool, especially that this is open source and we just kind of built these out from nothing, and now they're specifically referencing product details from my website in a simple way where a user can actually basically talk to these as 24/7 online customer service agents that were built in 10 minutes. So that is our workflow. We can see how many tokens were used, which definitely is of interest for those of us using API keys and things like that, because tokens will directly correlate to price. However, GPT-4o is very cheap to use. I don't remember specifically, but I will reference that later. But now that this has actually kind of been validated and we see that these agents do actually work, our next step is actually to go ahead and deploy this on my site as a chatbot. Now, it is not going to be on this Ominous Industries site because this is hosted through Shopify and I don't really want to mess with a lot of the backend on this. However, I do have a personal site that I've been building, and basically this is using Ghost, which is, think of it like WordPress, but in my opinion, better. And I am actually hosting it locally right here, so we can go ahead and actually edit this and then play with it. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So from the deployment tab here in AutoGen Studio, we can see that there are a bit of kind of instructions here, which unfortunately are a bit more programmatic and code related. However, if we scroll down to number 3, we can see that ideally we would be able to actually serve this team as a REST API, where basically we can kind of download the JSON instructions or layout of the team and then actually serve them on a port on our local machine. However, for what I'm going to be doing here, and to integrate this into Ghost, just to make a complete demonstration, not just showing you how to build it in the playground and play with it, I am going to pull out a little bit of code that I've already made, so we won't go through that in the video very much, but we are going to see this in action live. So the first thing to do is actually go ahead and navigate back to the team builder here, and we are going to notice that there is a button right here to actually download this team. If we click this, we will see that this downloads the team-config.json. The 2 has been appended there because I have obviously downloaded this before when I was just playing with this out of curiosity. So in deploy, you will see that it is reference path to team.json. So in a perfect world, we would just be able to kind of point that JSON file here and it would work very well. But I am going to just be using this in a kind of Python script that will allow it to just play nice with the website, which we will do now. We are going to see that this is just basically a very simple kind of server that will actually go ahead and point to our downloaded team config, which we can see is the thing we just downloaded from the AutoGen Studio right here. So if I go ahead and actually just go to that path, which is downloads, we can see that these are all of the team config JSON files that were downloaded from AutoGen Studio, and they are all exactly the same. I've just downloaded them multiple times for testing purposes. So if we were to actually go ahead and just click on one and actually go through it, we can see some things that will remind us of the agents we just built. A team of 3 agents. We have the web agent. It actually will show the URL that it is going to start at. This will actually expose the API key. So again, make sure you're very careful with these in a deployment and production environment. But basically, this is our agentic workflow for the purpose of what we want to understand it as. So our next thing to do, and pretty much wrapping up to actually being able to see this online in action and live, is to go ahead and actually run this app. Now, I don't actually need the AutoGen Studio to be open anymore when I use this. So we are basically just going to Control-C, which will close that. And essentially what that means is that it is no longer being served on our local machine. So if I was to refresh this page, it will just say unable to connect because we have stopped that service. However, because we built the agents, we don't actually need it right now. And all I'm going to do is just run this script, which will allow our agents to be accessible for the Ghost instance, which we will show now. So I have navigated to my desktop, which is where this app actually exists, or this Python script named app, I should say. It is bad practice to have all of this on your desktop too, so just definitely ignore that. But in order to start this, I am just going to type python app.py. And we will see that it is now running. However, we are not actually going to click this or do anything with it because we are going to let our Ghost website actually be the one that connects to this through allowing users to chat with our new customer service agent. So I can essentially go ahead and just minimize this Visual Studio screen. I'm going to go to my Ghost site right here, which is being served locally on my machine. And if I refresh it, we will see that it stays the same. It is still incomplete, so please don't judge me for any mistakes or weirdness you see on this website. However, the next thing to do is from within my Ghost admin, which this is more kind of web developer-ish, so don't worry too much about what we're doing here, but just know that this is for demonstration purposes and it will make sense in like 45 seconds. So in a Ghost website, you can actually inject code into the site header and site footer. One of the things I have injected here is the Calendly widget, so you can actually book calls and things like that, which basically means when I click book a consultation, that opens. So this code is actually handling that and allows that to function. In the same vein as that, that is how we're actually going to build out our little agentic chat function. Now, I do actually have that saved on my computer here. So we will see that I do have a little chat widget script right here built out, which basically has some CSS and style information for the chat box that will appear on the website. And it also has some logic to actually have our agents be accessed through this kind of little Python script that's running in this terminal window right here. And again, don't worry too much about the actual, like, how this is working. This is just more of a demonstration of how quickly this can be done and with how minimal of like hardcore coding you need to do for the agents. So once I paste this widget code in here into the site footer in Ghost, I am simply going to press save. And once we see that turn green, I'm going to go back to the website here and refresh it. And we're going to now see that in the bottom right corner, we have a chat with us chat box. So what this is basically is now a 24/7 customer service agent that someone could chat with. Now, of course, I want to clarify that the customer service agent right now is designed to answer questions about my R1 robot, which was on the Ominous Industries website. So I just want to make it clear that it won't actually answer questions about this site right here because there's really nothing to answer on this site. So for demonstration purposes, this will want to talk about my robot, and that's what we're going to do right here. So I will say, just please tell me about the R1 robot. And we will click send. It will take a little bit of time, and I haven't done too much cleanup on the actual response we get from the agents, so it may actually include the terminate tag, or we may see some of the actual chain of thought from these agents, but after a little bit of time, we are actually going to get a result from our customer service agentic workflow, which is exactly what we see right here. The Ominous Industries R1 robot is a personal AI companion priced at $410, designed for accessibility and user engagement, blah, blah, blah. But basically, our agent just went ahead and actually autonomously responded to a customer inquiry about our product. An agent that we just built in, I don't know specifically how long it's been, but I'm going to say 15 minutes because it probably sounds like a catchy title. But really, this is something we just did in a drag and drop fashion without having to do much coding at all. Now, I understand that actually getting this implemented onto the site and things like that was probably more intricate just in terms of running the server and things like that. But basically what I want to harp on here is the fact that we built the agentic workflow with like drag and drop, kind of like we copied the template, basically just changed a few things and turned this into a team of customer service agents that can answer questions about our product. This, in my opinion, is so cool and something that I absolutely wanted to show because I do a lot of very technically kind of heavy focused videos, but there is also a big subset of individuals who want to know, okay, how can I use AI to just help me accomplish this business goal? And this is a really simple and eloquent kind of way to do that. So AutoGen and AutoGen Studio is really fantastic. I want to give full props to this team for open sourcing this and maintaining it and making it so cool. I really am quite enamored with this. And I just think the ability to actually go ahead and get this deployed, built, and actually functional in such a quick way without a lot of headache in terms of the backend stuff and the coding, it's exciting. And I wanted to share it. I hope that it was of some value, and it is pretty cool. So I don't want to keep talking to the agents and things like that, but this is exciting and definitely speaks to the future of progress of agents and how they can autonomously perform actions.